get into it. So I specifically want to talk to the woman who thought that being in their 30s, they would have their best friend by now. Okay. Because I was that woman. I thought by the time I reached my 30s, I was going to find that one person, where you can call for everything, do everything with, jive with, the whole thing. And when my life didn't look like that, automatically I thought that there was something wrong with me, there's something off, or what could I have done differently? And I just eventually realized that I wasn't actually grieving. Like I wasn't actually grieving like the best friend part. I realized I was grieving the expectation of what I thought adulthood was supposed to look like what I thought friendship should look like, right? And what's interesting is I don't actually think the answer is finding the perfect best friend anymore, right? My perspective on friendship has completely changed, and I want to tell you why. And hey, to anyone that's watching, how's it going? So, I thought by the time I was in my 30s, I'd have that one person, the friend I would call every day, the person I would travel with, the person who you always knew, that always knew what was happening in your life. And I thought that was what adulthood looked like when it came to friendships. Um, and I realized that it was some sort of expectation in my mind where I was like, okay, well, this is how it's going to be. But I've quickly learned that it's not always so black and white when it comes to friendships. And I've quickly learned that sometimes like your friendships may come in like compartmentalizations, meaning like you may have the friend where they're specifically like you specifically set time and dates to meet up and you do fun things together. And maybe sometimes you'll chat. Or you maybe have the other friend where they like, maybe they like going on walks or something like that. Or the other friend where they're like just like a church friend. So like they're like your church Christian friends and you talk about God with. And then you may have the other friend where they're like your business friend, for example. And I just believe that they're not all just like one thing. And I've gotten to a point where I got to see like I'm not saying it's unrealistic, okay? To expect your best friend to be just one thing. But I'm saying that you may need multiple friends for different things. Now, there are people that find that friends, where it's like what for they find that one friend that can do everything together, which is amazing. But as I've gotten older, I got to see like, okay, like the expectations I've had for friendship where I was like, "Oh, okay, I have to do everything we have to do everything together." Like basically when you're back in like elementary school or high school, I realized, hey. And I just realized that that's no longer the standard for me. And nor should be for you, especially if you're like in your 30s and you're like, okay, I don't have that one best friend. And I would say the first thing is like getting rid of the any expectation you have of how your friendships could look because it can look very different. Right? Good, good, good. How are you guys doing? Just talking about best friends in your 30s. That is a topic. Um and I think I think once I let go of the expectations of how a friendship should look like, I think things got way better for me. Because I was no longer um putting that pressure on that person to fulfill like what I was looking for in friendships. And when I say expectations, it could be like, oh, you're expecting the person to like your friend to like call you every day, right? Because that's how like a best friend, like how you imagine a best friend to be, where you could call them all the time, you meet it for coffee, all this stuff. But just accepting that, okay, like maybe we're talking every so often. Hey, pumpkin, how are you? How was your day? And just maybe accepting that, okay, like with this certain friend, like I'm gonna see them often, but it doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, we're gonna be talking every day. But when we do talk, we have a good time. Like when we do talk and I invite them to something, they're ready to show up, type thing, right? Um, so I realized that when it comes to grief, right? Because I know a lot of people tend to have grief because it's like they wish they had someone, right, in terms of friendship, that best friend, because there's a sense of them that feels lonely. But um I just realized that I wasn't actually grieving a friend, right? Um I just feel like what I felt like was being lost was basically the expectations in my mind. So when I didn't have friendships, every time I would go to someone and ask them like, well, how do you make friends? Like I used to always ask people that, just ask people in general. They'll always be like, well, if you're not friends with them in childhood, um, then you're basically doomed, basically. And I remember thinking, well, a lot of people move, or especially like if as you get older, like people end up doing other things, they start families, or people just change. And I always thought like something was just like wrong with me because my life didn't look a certain way. Like I didn't have that like, like that best friend, like throughout my years. Like yes, I've had friends, but I didn't have that best friend where you're like close knit. Um and don't get me wrong, I've met people like that. Like I remember I met these two awesome women where they said that they actually, I forgot how they met, but they found out that they actually lived like near each other in Toronto. And so what they would do is like every day, like they'll sometimes like meet up for coffee or like go to Pilates together or something like that. And I thought, remember thinking that's cute, like you don't hear about it. But the thing is, I want to remind you that it's rare. Like, not to say it's not possible, but like you don't hear every day someone doing that. And I remember I had this discussion with someone where, funny enough, and I remember I went to dinner with a friend and we were actually discussing this topic. And she was saying that because we are talking about these two people where they're not the specific girl, but some other people where they were chilling and meeting every day. And I remember she kind of like halted the conversation and she was like, she made this really good point and she was like, yeah, like I think as you get older, like it's not realistic to like meet up with your friend every day. Or like be like chatting every day. Because a lot of times it's like you have work and you have other like obligations, and especially if you're studying or you're thriving for other things, it's like it's not the norm to just have someone where it's like you're like talking to them all the time and every day and all that stuff. Um, hey Mia. Hey Mary. Um, and I remember it really sat with me. I never forgot that conversation. This was actually a couple years ago because it gave me so much perspective. Because sometimes we can go in where we're like, "Oh, I want that best friend," right? But our view, like how do you say, our perspective on it is we're thinking of how we had the friendships back in like high school, right, where you would talk to them all the time, all that stuff. But sometimes that may not be like it may not be a reality for the friendship you currently have. And it may look differently, but then because it looks differently and doesn't look the way we want it in our minds, um we may not, I don't know, we may not like cherish a friendship as much. Oh, thanks, Pumpkin. um like we may not cherish the friendship the way we want to cherish it because we're thinking, well, it's not this way and it's this way, so like therefore it doesn't meet my expectations. But I believe like it's important that it's important that we're adjusting our expectations. I'm not saying you're lowering or settling, but like the expectation of how a friendship should be. um like it's not just one way. um and so for me, I feel like the hidden grief was always thinking that like something was wrong, or I wasn't doing something right because the friendship wasn't going the way I just imagined, or how you see in society, right? Like you'll see like, Sex in the City, and like, or like all these other shows, like how like a best friend is, but it's like, it just in reality, in adult when you're adulting, it's sometimes not that way. Like you're not talking for hours on the phone. Um so I think what I more so grieved was the loss of the expectation, where it was like, it wasn't like, oh, I'm really grieving not having a friend because I had friends. It was like grieving the idea that like, is it's like the expectation of like what you feel like a best friend should be. Um like, you grieve that kind of loss where you're like, okay, I have to adjust it. But like, you adjusting it doesn't mean that it's like wrong, right? Um so like, what changed is, for me, like when it came to best friends, I just stopped measuring my life against that expectation, um of like how a friendship should be. And I started realizing that friendships can look different. And I think that's very key. Like, not all friendship is going to look the same. And I have people from different parts of my life. I have friends, people where I dance with, in terms of salsa. I have people where I grab coffee with, go to restaurants with. Then I have people that I can have really deep conversations with. And I have different circles. Um, so it's important that it's like you're embracing the different parts that friendship comes, and how in different ways that it can look, and not expecting that person to just be that one thing. I think that's, it's like, basically it's like not putting your eggs in one basket for your that best friend to be everything. And I'm not saying again that you can't have that, but I found that once I set my expectations and I just allowed myself to accept, okay, so everyone's gonna be different, right? Everyone has different personalities, people are unique, and I started accepting, like, okay, like I can have friendships in different areas. I found that that's when my friendship life got better. And if anything, I found that it's been more beneficial as well, rather than depending on one person. Because what usually happens, and this is just my views, okay? I feel like what usually happens is people depend on that one friend, and then when something happens, then they're down and out about it. Like, how many of you guys seen someone, or you've experienced that, where you're best friends with someone, especially in your adulthood, in your 30s, and then all of a sudden the friendship breaks down, and then you're extremely hurt by it, because and then they were your only friend, so then you're basically sad, down and out. Um, like, I was speaking to a friend the other day where that exact thing happened, where like she had a best friend, um and something happened. Like, I didn't really go into details, but something happened, and then basically that friend decided not to proceed, and then obviously she was down about it, which I understand. But then I had to keep on reminding that person, like, this is why you're in this space, to make new friends, right? This is why you're trying to expand your circle. I don't think you should ever like put your eggs in like your eggs in one basket, like in one person, because it causes disappointment. I find when you basically have friends for different areas of your life, um when there's maybe one friend out of the, I'm just giving example, like out of five, where they may end up doing something else, or I don't know, like they remove themselves from the friendship, or they're going through things, you don't feel it as much, you're not as dependent. It's like you kind of have like a roster. I think that's a good term. It's like you have a roster of friends for different things, so then you're not affected like when something, like one thing happens. And I'm not saying that you're not going to go through hurt and disappointments and friendship, but that works so well for me once I start to accept that. And it's also adapting like to the way your friend is. Like, so I know nowadays, like what's very popular is people talk about like, oh, I don't reach out to them. Especially if they don't reach out to me, and I kind of stop responding, blah blah blah. But it's like you don't know what that person is going through. And I understand that friendship should be reciprocal, but it's also accepting like the way, like it's also accepting like, okay, like this is how that person is, and if you like being around them, you create the party. Like, you don't have to wait for them to create the party, right? You do as much as you can handle. So if you feel like, okay, I can no longer create that party with that person and the friendship, right? But if you feel like, okay, I joined a company, like when I talk to them, we have a good time. I understand like what's going on. Like they're working super long hours. Like I have a friend like that where she works super long hours. She's trying to do all her side quests, and I begin to accept, okay, like. And we do talk like here and there, but I got to accept like, okay, well, if she's working very long hours, it's gonna be very likely like she's gonna be very tired, right? To be talking on the phone. Like if you're working all day, like working 11 hours, 10 hours, like you have to take those things into consideration because you're adulting. But it's not an excuse for someone not to be reciprocating, but it's learning to adapt to your different friendships. So maybe there's a dynamic where you don't like you may not talk to them every day, maybe talk every so often, um, but then when you meet up, it's solid. Or maybe there's a different dynamic where you talk to them like pretty much almost every day. Or I have friendships where the dynamic is like they'll like check up on me, right, and say, "Hey, how's it going?" All that stuff. And for a while we would talk every few days, every day. And then they kind of get overwhelmed with work and then we pop up again. I'm okay with that. Like as long as there's like ongoing communication. Um, and so I want to like give you a challenge, okay? And if you want that deep friendship, it has to start somewhere, okay? So the thing about it is, I'm gonna be real when it comes to best friends, because especially if you're like, well, Nikki, I really want that best friend. It's like everyone wants the 5 year like friendship, right? Or everyone wants that friendship where you're like, oh my God, I want to have someone where I can do everything with, blah blah blah. But the thing about it is no one wants to put energy into the friendships that are maybe just 1 week or 5 week. Like or maybe it's just 5 weeks that you guys have known each other. Or maybe it's just been a few months, right? But it's like you have to start somewhere. Um and I find that sometimes people want the finished product, right? They want that friendship that they want that best friend friendship that like how it would be fast forward in 5 years or not even like let's say even like 1 year or 2 years. But it's like they don't want to put in the work, they're not patient. And the thing about it is like most people they don't want to go through that stage where they're initiating, they're planning things. You know, you're going on an awkward first coffee, like meetup. Um, being the one to text first, getting rejected, seeing someone 10 different times and like making an extra effort. But the thing about it is like it takes a lot of effort and you may be the one that have to be the first one to put yourself out there. Right? You may be the one that has to be intentional and ask different people to go out, or when you like meet that friend for the first time, like you ask them out for a second, third, fourth time because it takes multiple times for things to catch on. And even like texting throughout or calling, like talking on the phone. I think talking on the phone is such a lost art, like talking on the phone, like calling your friends, like even though it may feel awkward, but like making that initial effort to just call them and talk on the phone because it like strengthens that relationship. And doing that, like eventually like there's a vulnerability that helps you create meaningful friendships. But you won't get that if you're not willing to go through that awkward stage of, and finding the person, getting rejected, all that stuff, right? um and so for me, like I think what else I started doing is I stopped looking at the titles and I look at my friends as my friends. And I'm now just focusing on building community, right? I'm not obsessed with like finding a best friend or like falling into that trap. I'm just obsessed with like finding really good, healthy friends. Like, be obsessed with finding healthy friends who adore you, who want to be around you, who make the effort to contact you, with like reasonable expectations. Um, you're like, I feel like the hardest part is finding really like I'm not saying it's not to find friends. It's just the hardest part is finding really good friends, who like adore you. Like if you find a friend that adores you and loves reaching out to you and likes being around you, like those are the people that you want to be with because like you want to be around someone that likes you, likes your presence, like as a friendship. Like you don't want to be around someone um who like you feel like you're pulling tea out of. Like you want to be around, like let's normalize being around people who want to be around you. I think that's so important because I think it's so easy like when it comes to looking for friendships, especially really good ones, that sometimes we can end up liking that friend more in terms of wanting to be their friend, but it's not being returned. And so it's about being aware and paying attention to people who are like, oh, like Nikki, I like being around you, like, oh, you're cool, like stuff like that, like. And that's the things I've been paying attention to, because as you start to build friendships where people adore you and the people like you, then that's easier for that friendship to deepen and become more meaningful. And I think it's way easier when, how do I say this? So I'm not saying not being intentional, but like you don't feel like you're like trying to force the friendship like into something. Like like when you start being intentional, it's at ease. Like it just falls into place. Like you're asking them to go places and then they're reciprocating and they're like, yeah, like let's go. Like they're very open. I think it's just important for them to be open. They're open to your invitations. They're open to meeting up with you. They're not making like constant excuses. Obviously if they have like work, whatever, but it's like they're not making a constant excuse. Like you could tell when someone just wants to be around you, like a friend just wants to be your friend. So I think that's important. Um so my question I would end with this is, what if the friendship you're looking for isn't your one best friend? Okay. Right. What if it's multiple of different people? It's a roster of different types of friends. Right. What if it's adjusting your expectations, not lowering your standards, but just adjusting your expectations of how you see friendship and how they should be. I'll leave it at that. And as always, you can go into the description and get the Friendship Reshape Journal. It's ready for you to dig in, especially if you want to assess your friendships, and see if it meets the things I was talking about, and see, okay, if like, do I have friendships in different areas and so forth, and like really analyzing your friendships that you have now, right? But all right, guys, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.